Love and light, everyone. Thank you for being here today and sharing my messages. I've been in practice for over 30 years working with altered states of consciousness. With this film, I'm going to explain to you the way I work and what I've learned through my journey working with hundreds of clients and spirits, because sometimes spirits need help as well.
Mel Waters' property has a hole in the ground. Mel and his neighbours use the hole as a trash dump. Garbage, broken appliances, old tyres, everything went into the hole, and it didn't fill up. And then they began to notice other strange things. Getting to the bottom of Mel's hole, on Mel Waters' property in Manistash Ridge, west of Ellensburg, Washington, there is a hole in the ground that looks like a well, but it's not a well. Like the owners of the property before him, Mel used the hole as a trash dump. His neighbours used it too. Garbage, broken appliances, old tyres, dead animals, everything went into the hole. After a while, Mel started to wonder, why doesn't this hole fill up? Then he started to notice other strange things about the hole. His dogs wouldn't go near it. It caused his radio to receive strange signals, and it didn't seem to have a bottom. Let's see if we can get to the bottom of Mel's hole. Mel began trying to measure the depth of the hole. Mel was an experienced deep-sea fisherman, having fished for sharks. He emptied 3 fishing reels of about 1,500 yards of monofilament, trying to determine the depth. Mel says, I was buying fishing line in bulk, So far I've sunk about 15 miles of line into the hole without reaching the bottom. Dogs refuse to get within 100 feet of the hole, and birds won't sit on the wall surrounding it. Another strange thing is that there's no echo when you yell into the hole. Indeed, I've never heard anything hit the bottom when tossed in, said Mel. We once tossed in an old refrigerator and I never heard it hit the bottom. No crash, splash or crunch. Mel and his neighbours, who were B.Sc, decided that they would start doing some experimenting. The first thing they did was lower a bucket of store-bought ice down into the hole as far as they could, which ended up being about 1,500 feet. They had kept another pail of the same ice on the surface to use as a control, so they could know when to pull up the ice from the hole to compare the two samples. Once they hoisted the ice from the pit, they immediately noticed the difference between it and the half-melted ice on the surface. The ice in the hole had not melted at all. Even odder, it was no longer cold to the touch, and it remained in the same shape without melting while in Mel's hands. The ice became the focus of their testing, and one of the things they tried to do was to cook it over an open flame to melt it. Instead of melting though, the ice caught fire. The flame was more like a flicker of light that produced heat, and not the usual orange flame that you could naturally see from a fire. Mel stated that the bucket of ice stayed lit on fire for months, and that it was likely that it was still burning even today. It didn't seem to go out. He mentioned that one of the B.Sc in the group even took some of it home and put it in his stove to keep his cabin warm during the winter. They continued to experiment with the ice and sent more of it down the hole. They would not always get the same results as the first test though, and Mel stated that it only worked about a third of the time that they tried it. The next thing was one of the B.Sc decided that he wanted to be lowered down into the pit himself. Mel and the others in the group felt this was a bad idea considering that what had happened to the ice. So instead they sent down a sheep. The sheep, like every other animal that had been near the hole or Mel's, was panicked and fought as they brought it closer to the hole and prepared it to go down. It was put into such a fight that they were unable to get it into place, so one of the B.Sc hit it between the eyes and stunned it long enough for them to place it in a crate which would be lowered down into the hole. They moved the crate into position with the sheep now inside it to lower it down using a cable. However, the sheep had awoken from its temporary daze and went absolutely crazed inside of the crate. It was letting out a blood-curdling scream of protest and clearly had no desire to go down the hole. Finally, they were able to get the crate over the centre of the hole, only the sounds from the sheep had stopped, but they could still see a violently shaking cage. That is when they began to lower the sheep slowly down into the pit. About halfway through the cable, they could no longer see the line moving around from the animals struggling. They continued to lower it until it had reached its maximum length, which was about 1,500 feet. When it reached the bottom of the line, they all felt an odd humming sensation from the metal rim of the hole. They left the animal down there for around 30 minutes. After the half-hour mark, they began hoisting the crate back up. As they pulled the crate up, they noticed that nothing was moving inside it. The crate itself looked undamaged, however the lamb inside had died. The B.Sc, being herders, were well prepared to take care of dead animals, and one of them took the lamb to a nearby table to examine it. They used this opportunity to conduct a bit of an autopsy on the animal. Mel noticed that right away the sheep looked as though it had been cooked on the inside. Also of note, there was an odd coloured gel surrounding what looked like a large tumorous growth inside the sheep. The tumour appeared to be pulsating, so they cut it out and placed it on the table next to the carcass of the sheep. They cut into the massive tumour, and from it emerged a sight that shocked them all. It was like a cross between a fetus and a baby seal, with an umbilical cord still attached to the sheep. The seal-like creature, however, had the eyes like that of a human. The creature disconnected itself from its cord and gave a look of compassion and reverence. Mel described the feeling as having been in the presence of a miracle. Not everyone felt that way, as one of the B.Sc suggested killing the creature, but they didn't kill it. They simply continued to watch and study it as it moved to the edge of the table on its own. Mel, feeling connected to it in some way, reached out and picked it up and placed it on the ground. He noted that the ooze on his hands after touching it had the smell of ozone. It lay on the ground, studying each member of the group as though it was intelligent enough to recognise things about each and every one of them. Mel says that it had to have been 2 hours of this, and that the looks that it gave them were the most compassionate he had ever witnessed one creature give another living thing. Mel, once again feeling compelled, helped the creature to the edge of the hole. It gave them all one final look and a nod and leapt back into the hole. After such an emotional and draining event, they felt deeply touched by it all. They decided to dump the remains of the sheep back down the hole before they left. Mel mentioned that in August, just before he left for Nevada, his doctor had diagnosed him with advanced terminal cancer and gave him just 6 months to live. However, after returning from Nevada and this experience with the creature in the hole, the cancer was completely gone from his body. Mel feels as though his encounter with the creature from the hole somehow cured him. An elder B.Sc before Mel left for home said that he was not surprised by their story, and that he felt that the hole was always of a spiritual nature. Mel visited his property the day after he had been on the radio show. He noticed helicopters flying around and over the property. Friday and Saturday, after shopping in town, he went to stop by the property, but noticed that there were military personnel and vehicles blocking the drive up to his land. An armed soldier advised him that there was a plane crash on the property, but Mel didn't see any smoke. When he identified himself as the owner, a man in civilian clothes that was in charge told him that he would not be allowed onto his land. The man also threatened Mel by saying that if he didn't disappear, they could find a drug lab if they wanted. The man also mentioned that Mel could go ahead and tell whoever he wants because nobody would believe him. Mel's departure was all handled by the US and Australian governments. He was to receive $3 million a year on the lease for the land, and was to follow a non-disclosure agreement in regards to the little that he knew about the hole and the property. About 12 days later, he found himself in San Francisco in an alley. He thinks that he was kept unconscious for 12 days and that he was shocked to find out that he had no back teeth. His molars had been removed while he was unconscious. The conclusion by Colin Demét of the metaphysical perspective. I'm not surprised by the intervention of government resources, nor the cover-up. Alas, we will never know the truth, as a blanket covers any information, as was done with the Cola Deep borehole. As for the extraction of Mel's teeth, recent advances in molecular biology and DNA and the language of life yields information beyond our imagination. The creature from inside the sheep. The sheep would have had a tiny fetus which was possessed by a spirit from the dimension of hell. The spirit is suffering and shows compassion. The creature is asking for help, which is common in hell. Prevention is far better than cure where hell is concerned, for hell is a part of the matrix. Please see my film, Space and Time Continuum, The Matrix from the Game of Life, for more information. The deformed spirit would have been suffering, confused and delirious. The smell of ozone, like sulphur and other toxic chemicals, comes from hell. The ground level ozone is not emitted directly into the air, but is created by chemical reactions between oxides of nitrogen and organic compounds. The internal combustion inside the sheep is caused by the etheric body being contaminated by radiation from the deep heat from the fires of hell. For even though the centre of the earth is frozen, there still exists layers of fire which surround it. The creature returns to hell, for it has no place on earth. Thank you for sharing my observation of Mel's hole, and remember that Jesus descended into hell for 3 days from his crucifixion to release some souls from entrapment.